Welcome to the DX Today podcast, your daily deep dive into the AI ecosystem. I'm Chris, and joining me as always is Laura.
Thanks, Chris, and happy Friday, July 3rd to everyone listening. Today, we are digging into a story that I think quietly signals a huge shift in how enterprise AI actually gets built, and it comes from the biggest cloud provider on the planet.
That's right. This week, Amazon Web Services announced it is putting $1 billion behind a brand new organization called Forward Deployed Engineering. And the whole idea is to physically embed AWS engineers inside customer companies to build AI systems shoulder to shoulder with their teams.
Exactly, and the details are fascinating. We are talking about teams of 5 to 6 AWS engineers who parachute into a customer environment for roughly 45-day engagements, and their entire mission is to ship production-grade agentic AI systems alongside the customer's own staff.
So before we go deeper, let's unpack the name itself, because Forward Deployed Engineer is a term with real history in this industry. And I suspect a lot of our listeners have heard it somewhere before without knowing exactly where it came from.
Great instinct, because the concept was popularized by Palantir more than a decade ago. Palantir built its whole business on sending engineers into government agencies and companies to configure software on site. And that model was considered weird and unscalable for years until suddenly everyone wanted to copy it.
And now the copying has become a full-blown trend because, if I remember correctly, OpenAI and Anthropic both stood up their own forward-deployed engineering ventures recently, which makes Amazon the third major AI player to jump into this embedded engineer game in short order.
Right, and here's the structural difference that I find really telling. The OpenAI and Anthropic efforts are structured as joint ventures with outside investors sharing the risk and the upside, while Amazon's $1 billion comes entirely from internal resources with no joint venture structure at all.
That seems like a meaningful distinction, so walk me through why Amazon would choose to keep this entirely in-house when its competitors decided to bring in partners, because $1 billion is real money even for a company the size of Amazon.
Because when you own the whole thing, you keep 3 compounding assets. AWS keeps the full client relationship, it keeps the engineering feedback loop flowing straight into its product teams, and it keeps every ounce of institutional knowledge that each engagement generates instead of splitting it with venture partners.
So the engagements themselves are almost a data collection exercise about what real enterprises actually struggle with. And that intelligence flows back into how AWS builds its platforms, which might be worth more than the consulting revenue itself over the long run.
That is exactly the play in my view. Every 45-day deployment teaches AWS something about where enterprise AI projects break down in the real world. And that knowledge compounds across hundreds of customers in a way that no survey or sales call could ever capture.
Okay, let's talk about who is actually signing up for this. Because a program like this lives or dies on whether serious companies trust it. And I understand the early customer list is surprisingly impressive for something that just launched this week.
It really is. The named early customers include the Allen Institute, Cox Automotive, the NBA, the NFL, Ricoh, and Southwest Airlines. So you have got scientific research, automotive retail, professional sports, imaging technology, and a major airline all represented right out of the gate.
The NFL one caught my attention because they apparently have concrete results already. And I would love for you to share what actually got built there, since professional sports leagues are not exactly known for being bleeding-edge software organizations.
So the NFL says it worked with these forward-deployed teams to ship 2 products into production in a matter of weeks. Something called NFL Fantasy AI and another called NFL IQ, and the operative word there is weeks, not the quarters or years these projects usually take.
And that speed claim is really the heart of Amazon's pitch, right? The official framing is that this model compresses timelines from months to days, which sounds almost too good to be true, given everything we know about how slowly enterprise software projects typically move.
It does sound aggressive, but there is a mechanism behind it. The model is what AWS calls agentic first, meaning the embedded engineers are not just writing code by hand, they are working alongside purpose-built AI agents that handle huge chunks of the build process themselves.
So it is a compound bet, humans plus agents deployed together, which means Amazon is essentially using AI to accelerate the deployment of AI. And every engagement doubles as a proving ground for whether agentic development actually works under real enterprise conditions.
Precisely. And that is why I think this is bigger than a consulting announcement. If teams of 6 people with agents can do what used to take a 50-person systems integrator a year, then the economics of the entire IT services industry start to wobble.
Let's sit with that for a second, because the traditional consulting industry is enormous. You have Accenture, Deloitte, Infosys, and dozens of others generating hundreds of billions in annual revenue from exactly this kind of enterprise. Technology implementation work that Amazon is now attacking directly.
And the contrast in the business model is deliberate and pointed. Traditional consulting assesses, recommends, and bills by the hour, while AWS says these engagements are structured around shared goals and business results, not billable hours, which is a shot fired directly at that entire industry.
The cynic in me wants to push back, though, because Amazon is not running a charity here. Surely the end game is that every one of these engagements deepens the customer's dependence on AWS infrastructure, which is where the real money gets made over decades.
Oh, 100%. The strategy is classic Amazon. The $1 billion is essentially a customer acquisition and lock-in investment because every agentic system these teams build runs on AWS compute, AWS databases, and AWS model services, generating consumption revenue for years after the engineers leave.
Although there is one design choice that cuts against the pure lock-in narrative, and it is the self-sufficiency piece. So explain that part, because it genuinely surprised me when I read about how these engagements are supposed to end.
Yes, this is the interesting wrinkle. AWS explicitly designed the program so customers are self-sufficient when a deployment ends, meaning clients walk away with both the new solutions and new engineering capabilities of their own, because the embedded teams are training the customer's staff the whole time.
So the pitch to a chief information officer is essentially, we will build your first production agent systems with you, teach your people how to do it themselves, and then get out of the way, which is a very different promise than the classic consulting land and expand playbook.
Right, and honestly, it is smart positioning because the number one complaint about big consulting engagements is that the knowledge walks out the door when the consultants do, leaving companies dependent and no more capable than when they started, just poorer and with more slide decks.
Now let's zoom out to the timing, because this announcement is not landing in a vacuum. It arrives in the middle of a very tense moment for the tech labor market, and some of the coverage has explicitly connected this program to the layoff wave.
That is the uncomfortable subtext. This launch comes as tech layoffs surge across the industry, including at Amazon itself. So you have a company simultaneously reducing headcount in some divisions while spending $1 billion to embed elite engineers inside other people's companies to automate their workflows.
There is something almost poetic and slightly dark about that combination, because the very systems these forward-deployed teams are shipping, production agentic AI that handles real operations, are exactly the kind of technology that puts pressure on white-collar employment in the first place.
And I think we have to be honest that both things can be true. These deployments genuinely upskill the customer's engineers who participate, which is a real benefit, while the agents they collectively build will absolutely absorb work that junior employees or outside contractors used to perform.
It also connects to a theme we have touched on before without repeating ourselves, which is that the AI job market impact is not one uniform story. It is a redistribution where embedded, AI-fluent engineers become more valuable while routine implementation work gets squeezed hard.
Exactly. And the forward-deployed engineer might be the single clearest example of the new premium job category. These are people who combine deep technical skill with customer-facing consulting ability, and all three major AI players are now competing to hire exactly that rare hybrid profile.
Let's talk about the why. Now, question, because enterprise AI has been the biggest story in technology for 3 years running. So what is it about this specific moment in mid-2026 that made Amazon decide embedded engineers were worth $1 billion?
The dirty secret of enterprise AI is the pilot graveyard. Study after study has shown that a huge majority of corporate AI pilots never reach production because companies buy the tools, run a proof of concept, and then stall out on integration, security, data plumbing, and organizational resistance.
So the bottleneck was never access to models or compute, both of which are abundant and getting cheaper. The bottleneck is the last mile of actually wiring these systems into messy legacy environments with real compliance requirements and real people who resist change.
And that last mile is precisely what forward-deployed engineers exist to solve. You cannot solve organizational friction with an API. You solve it with a person who sits in the customer's office, understands their specific mess, and ships something that works despite it.
Which raises the competitive question I keep circling back to, because if Amazon, OpenAI, and Anthropic are all fielding embedded engineering armies now, what does that mean for Microsoft and Google, who are conspicuously absent from this particular trend so far?
Microsoft has historically leaned on its massive partner ecosystem and its consulting arm to do this work. And Google Cloud has its own professional services organization, but neither has branded a dedicated agentic-first embedded program like this. So I would genuinely expect fast follows within months.
There's also a partner ecosystem angle here that deserves a mention because Amazon did not just launch this as an internal team, they simultaneously introduced something called forward deployed engineering for partners through the AWS Partner Network, which seems designed to soothe nervous systems integrators.
Right, because the obvious tension is that AWS just built a competitor to its own partners. The partner program essentially says, we will teach you the forward deployed methodology too, which lets Amazon scale the model beyond its own billion-dollar headcount while keeping partners inside the tent.
I want to raise the skeptical scenario before we wrap this section, because there is a world where this becomes an expensive services business that distracts Amazon from its platform focus. And services businesses historically carry much worse margins than selling infrastructure by the hour.
Totally fair, and Wall Street has punished cloud companies for services-heavy revenue before, but I think the 45-day time box is the answer to that concern, because short, repeatable, outcome-focused engagements look more like a product than open-ended consulting arrangements do.
That is a good point. The time box essentially forces the whole engagement to be productized. And if the agents doing much of the work keep improving, the margin profile of each deployment should actually get better over time, rather than worse, unlike human-only consulting.
And that is the flywheel to watch. Better agents make deployments faster. Faster deployments generate more engagements and more learning makes the agents better still. So Amazon is betting $1 billion that this loop compounds before competitors can build the same muscle.
So let's do quick takeaways for the different audiences listening, starting with enterprise leaders. Because if I am a chief information officer hearing this today, I am wondering whether this program or something like it should change my 2026 roadmap.
For enterprise leaders, the takeaway is that the excuse era is ending. If embedded teams can ship production agent systems in 45 days at the NFL and Southwest Airlines, boards will start asking why your AI initiatives have been stuck in pilot mode for 2 years.
And for the engineers and technologists in our audience, this seems like a clear signal about where the career value is heading. So give people your honest read on what skills this forward deployed world actually rewards over the next few years.
Learn to build with agents, not just with code, and invest in the human skills of working inside someone else's organization. Because the highest leverage role in this market is the person who can walk into a messy enterprise and leave behind working systems and capable teams.
And for investors and industry watchers, the thing to monitor is whether this billion-dollar bet shows up in AWS consumption growth over the next few quarters, and whether the traditional systems integrators start reporting pressure on exactly the implementation work Amazon is now doing itself.
My prediction is that within a year, every major cloud and model provider will have a forward deployed program, and we will look back on this week as the moment enterprise AI stopped being a software category and became a delivery model. That is my bold Friday call.
I love a confident prediction to close on, and I will add my own softer one, which is that the phrase forward deployed engineer will be on 10,000 job postings by next summer. Laura, as always, this was a fantastic conversation and a genuinely important story.
Likewise, Chris, this one was fun, and to everyone listening, keep an eye on this space because the embedded engineer wars are just getting started. Have a wonderful holiday weekend, everybody, and thank you so much for spending part of your Friday with us here.
That's all for today's episode of the DX Today podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.